Around 9:30 p.m. on June 1st, 1948, 21-year-old Mary Virginia Carpenter, a college student, was on her way to her dorm room. To get there, she took a cab from the train station to her school. Once she reached her stop, this is when a very strange encounter happened. In front of the dorm building, there were two boys in a cream-colored convertible. The cab driver, Zachary, saw the two boys as he approached to park in front of the building. He was quite concerned about the whole situation. I mean, who wouldn't be? You see two boys in the middle of the night with nobody around, it's only normal to be cautious. But Mary herself wasn't worried at all. In fact, she got out of the car, then proceeded to walk towards the boys and talk to them. She seems to know them and didn't show any signs of restraint. However, despite the friendly encounter between Mary and the two boys, this was the last time Mary was seen, and a huge search effort was initiated the following days. Zachary became an important witness in the investigation and told the police what happened that night in detail. They took his word for it, and they concluded that the two boys Mary met in front of the buildings were likely the suspects. So, it was a no-brainer they focused heavily on finding them. However, throughout the investigation, the case took an unexpected turn. It got complicated when authorities found out that Zachary had a history with the law enforcement from the past years. Even though this is a separate issue and irrelevant to the case, they still ultimately questioned the legitimacy of his story. They suspected that he made it all up to use it as an alibi. They think that the two boys never existed, and in reality, he was responsible for Mary's disappearance. Zachary picked up Mary at the Dallas Union Station around 6 p.m. She was not alone. Another woman was with her, named Marjorie. She met in the train. She attended the same university, and to save money, the two decided to share the same cab together. Marjorie's dorm was closer than Mary's, so Zachary decided to drop her off first. When they reached their first destination, it was only at this time that Mary noticed that she left her luggage at the train station. So instead of heading to the next stop, she asked the cab driver to go back to get her stuff back. Unfortunately, when they got back at the station, one of the employees told her that her bag was mixed with the rest and it wouldn't be available until the next day. With this bad news, she had no choice and told Zachary to pick it up tomorrow in exchange for extra cash. At the end, after all of this, it was already late and dark outside. The next stop is at Mary's dorm building. Around 9:30 p.m. was when they reached their destination. Upon arrival, there was a cream-colored convertible and two boys who appeared to be waiting for her. One was tall and the other was short and stocky. These were the only description Zachary could provide because at the time the streetlights were broken and there wasn't much visibility to see their faces to clearly describe what they looked like. Mary got off the cab and approached the two boys. She seems like she knew them, so Zachary assumed that they were friends. At the end, the cab driver didn't think there was anything out of the ordinary, so he dropped her off and went straight home at 10 p.m. 3 days later, Mary's boyfriend, Kenny, tried contacting her, but she was not picking up. Mary was supposed to phone him when she reached her school. Out of desperation, Kenny called her mother and asked if she knows where she is. Unfortunately, Mary's mom has no idea as well. She also said that she didn't get a call from her either. Police launched a search effort to find her. Multiple planes, boats, and search dogs were deployed to scour the fields around the area. Flyers were posted throughout the city to raise awareness of her missing case. While the search effort didn't find any physical evidence, the flyers proved to be somewhat effective. Because 5 days later, they received a tip from a person who claimed to have spotted the missing girl. He reported that he saw a girl alongside with two other men getting out of a cream convertible at a gas station, which by the sound of it fit the right description. However, the witness was not entirely sure if the girl was married since he didn't see her face up close. Nonetheless, this was the closest clue the authorities received, so they looked into this further and questioned the witness if they were acting out of the ordinary and asked which direction they were leaving from the gas station. To his response, the girl was acting normal and nothing was strange about her. Also, he couldn't recall which direction they went after they left the gas station. Although this seemed to be a lead to the case, some authorities were skeptical of this sighting. There is a good likelihood that those were not the same people. Their reasoning is that given how high profile her missing case is and the vast amount of flyers posted throughout the area, they believe that it's unlikely that those two boys and Mary would go out in public, especially at a place where they would likely to be seen, such as a gas station where it's usually busy. They suggested that there is a good possibility that the suspect saw one of the posters and went to hiding instead. From their perspective, if Mary was truly in danger, she would have shouted for help or made a run for it. So for them to be seen roaming around freely at a gas station just doesn't make sense, and the witness probably saw a regular friend group. At the end, despite the report, nothing came about it, and it didn't lead to anything. During the investigation, this case took an unexpected turn when authorities later found out that Zachary had a history with the law enforcement, which ultimately questioned the legitimacy of his story. This led them to believe that Zachary may have fabricated the whole story, and maybe the two boys he mentioned don't actually exist. They suggested that he was just using it to cover up his tracks, and when in reality he buried her body somewhere to conceal his crime. With such strong accusation, Zachary's wife stepped in and she disputed this whole thing. She informed the authorities that her husband got home at 10 p.m. that night. This was an important information because it questioned the time constraint of the crime. Zachary dropped Mary at 9:30 p.m., then got home at 10 p.m. So for him to commit the crime and dispose of the body within that 30-minute time frame will be impossible. However, authorities still suggested that there could be a possibility that he is the suspect, so they still went ahead and put him on a polygraph test. Numerous questions were asked to make sure whether he's telling the truth or not. They emphasized about his storyline, the time he picked them up and the time he dropped them off. They were testing him to see if they can find a hole in his story. At the end, after hours later, he passed the test and the police found him to be telling the truth and was ruled out as the suspect. From there, nothing came about the case. Not a single lead was found to piece everything together. So, what are the possible theories of this case? Well, it's clear to the authorities that the two boys were probably the suspect and Zachary was telling the truth. So, they suggested that Mary may have run away with those two and started a new life. This quickly faced a huge backlash and angered the family members. They suggested that if she indeed planned to run away, she wouldn't have asked the cab driver to pick up her luggage that she left at the station. Also, she didn't have any personal problems to just leave everything behind. So the narrative of her running away just doesn't make any sense and was quickly shut down. Another theory is that the two boys were also victims, and another suspect was responsible for the disappearance of all three. For the first few days, they thought this may be the case. However, as more weeks passed by, they slowly lose hope with this possibility. The main reason being that if a third party was responsible for the disappearance of all three, then someone close to one of the boys, a family member or a relative, would have reported one of them missing, which would verify that another suspect was involved. Since this wasn't the case and no one came forward to report the boys missing, it was then eventually ruled out. From there, more search effort continued in hopes to find about them. Unfortunately, after many more months, nothing came about it. Given there is no description of what their face looks like, it's almost impossible to truly identify them. 10 years later, on October 1959, a very strange twist in the case came about. The now ex-wife of the cab driver went up to the police and dropped a huge bombshell that could potentially break the case. She said that at the time of the initial investigation, 10 years ago, when she was still his wife, she lied about the time Zachary arrived. She recanted her old story and told them that Zachary actually arrived at their home the next morning at 2 a.m. This was completely different from what was originally said, which was 10 p.m. This reopened the case, and Zachary was contacted and was put into a polygraph test. Again, he was questioned profusely whether he was telling the truth or not. This time, far more questions were asked to pinpoint him as the suspect. They questioned the time he actually got home and what did he do after he dropped off Mary. But at the end, after multiple hours of questioning, they still came up with the same conclusion. He was telling the truth and he is innocent. Even after all that, nothing came about it. Not even a single belonging of her was discovered to at least give a lead to the case. On top of that, there was so much confusion whether the two boys really existed or Zachary lied and made it all up. Also, it didn't help the case that the now ex-wife came forward 10 years later and changed up her story. The whole thing is truly puzzling, and the case remained unsolved.